Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil FAQ. We're about 4 weeks into flower on season 3, and we're starting to get to the point where the grow is really easy to maintain. I've got time to do some FAQ questions, and so I've got some pulled up on the computer here. I've not looked at any of these questions yet, as per usual, and I'm just gonna go through one by one and do my best to answer them for you. And if there's any others that you guys would like me to add, I know it's been a while since we've done an FAQ, be sure to leave your questions in here, and next time we get an FAQ together, I'll go through this video and make sure we pull some. All right, so TG says, can I add nematodes to my worm bin to combat fungus gnats? Yes, this is a great idea. So there's a couple ways to consider this. A lot of times people will buy beneficial insects of sorts. Evergreen growers is a great one. And a lot of times you can order nematodes, or you can order beneficial mites, or you can order parasitic wasps or bumblebees and ladybugs, and there's so many of them. But when we're trying to control larvae, there's a few that you can get, and there's nematodes as well as predatory mites. The school of thought is you'd buy those and apply them to your soil. And in living soil, since we don't throw our soil away, the investment becomes worthwhile because we're keeping the soil forever. And so it's not such an expensive investment where we just put it in the soil and then we throw the soil away. And so in that case where instead of putting it in the soil, he's asking, can I put it in my worm bin? I think it's a great way to go because you're essentially inoculating your worm bin so that you're gonna have more of them. And as you make worm castings and you take the castings out, you'll be imparting the nematodes and predator mites to your soil everywhere that you apply it to. But there's another school of thought that says, hey, if you have a really good worm bin, you probably have some nematodes in there as well. And so I'm not sure if it's worth the investment. A lot of times in my worm bin, we get a lot of predatory mites, but I don't purchase them. I do feel that instead of putting these beneficials directly into the soil, it makes a lot of sense to put them in the worm bin so that we continue to brew our own, so to speak. But I don't have an exact answer. Nematodes are a little bit funnier in the sense that I can't see them without doing microscope work. So when I see predator mites in worm castings, I know they're there, I know they're multiplying, I know when I'm spreading them. Nematodes, not so much. And so the investment for nematodes might be better directly in the soil. I don't have an exact answer. The more you know, you're very scared to give a very definitive answer, but I think you could safely add nematodes to your worm bin, and my thoughts are it would work. Now here's another thing to think about. You don't need to do that to combat fungus gnats. To inoculate your bin and to spread that might be a good idea. But fungus gnats in a worm bin are a lot easier. You don't have a growing plant. So a lot of times the worm bin will have like a cover on it and you can just deal with it. And over time the gnats will go away. Another consideration is that you might be adding too much moisture. And when you're adding fresh food inputs or when you're watering it, you could overwater. And so the idea is to balance the carbon to nitrogen ratio by putting lots of browns or straw or shredded paper or shredded cardboard, something that has that high carbon content to balance the wet, rotten food produce or whatever else that you're putting in there, or the green leaves. And so when you have that and you have a thick layer of the carbon at the top, oftentimes it's such a thick barrier that the fungus gnats can't really persist. They can't get in through 3 inches of shredded cardboard to start to lay their eggs, and then conversely they can't climb out of it as easily. If the infestation is really active, a barrier of diatomaceous earth, fairly thick, it's a low investment, you don't have plants growing in it, you can literally coat it 1 inch thick, don't water, don't touch it, just let it stay dry on top for as long as you think is safe before your worm bin starts to dry out a little bit. After 1 day, the gnats will be gone. After a week or so of leaving it, I feel like all of the larvae that were in there will be gone. And now you can safely start to return to your normal worm bin practices. So barriers are a great way to go. A lot of times in soil, people will use sand to create a barrier of sand that the gnats can't go through, but that's more of a pain if you have lots of containers. But with one worm bin, a barrier is a great way to go. So I hope that answers your question. Master J says, what's your thoughts on using worm castings tea weekly? Supposed to have my phone off. What's your thoughts on using worm casting tea weekly? I've heard a lot now that molasses isn't good to keep adding, but instead could you use, say, casting tea, diluted down, or would this cause newt burn or lockout at some point? Master J, this is a good question. There's 2 things at play here. One is you're gonna hear there's a school of thought that says that you need to add sugars during flowering as kind of a finisher, or to increase the quality. And I think that if you're adding straight molasses to your soil and you're using copious amounts of it, you could be steering the soil the wrong way as far as the biology goes. It kind of causes nutrient cycling. If you're feeding all the microorganisms, they run out of sugar, they start to go look for stuff to eat. The idea when we're doing it in a compost tea is that molasses should already be consumed while brewing so that when we deploy the brew, we're not really deploying molasses. In that case, it's very safe. And so there's another school of people that says you should not brew compost teas with molasses. I'm not of that opinion. I believe that molasses is phenomenal for compost tea. As far as using worm casting tea weekly, go ahead and do it. You're not gonna have any issue. When we're talking about putting a cup of castings and a few tablespoons of molasses in a bucket of water and then diluting it and then spreading it and doing it only one time per week, we're talking about very, very small amounts. And oftentimes if we brew a really good tea, what we're doing is we're deploying microbes that will rapidly go through the food that's in the soil and nutrient cycle and make it available, and then they'll die and become nutrients themselves. We're not really gonna burn our plants in that manner. I've never caused a burn from having a regular diluted tea. Now, here's the opposite of that thought. While I say it's okay all the time, an expert opinion wouldn't be expert if it wasn't like a maybe, right? So if you have castings that are really high in sodium and maybe not as good, and you're using them fairly often, small amounts of sodium can start to build up in the soil over time. And so I'm not gonna just go out there and say everything would work, but from most of the castings that I see on the market, from diluting it to a normal ratio and brewing a tea, you could probably do it every single watering and be safe, let alone every week. So I hope that answers your question. Once a week would be fine. I used to do it a lot more often, and I've had great results using teas all the time. I found that in my lifestyle where I'm pretty busy and I have a grow going 24/7, 365, I kind of get over the stuff that takes a lot of labor to do every single week. I try and be consistent, but I also try not to do stuff that is that laborious, and I end up using like Rootwise Microbe Complete, or just using more soil or a top dressing, but I still think teas are really good and once a week is safe. Alan says, kind of off subject, but I was gifted a chapin and told nothing harmful was in it. Is there some way to clean it to set my mind at ease, or should I just re-gift it? That's a tough question. The chapin sprayer is a concrete sprayer. We sell them brand new. They're industrial metal and they're strong, and so they're gonna last a long time, where a lot of times the plastic sprayers break. And you don't have to have a chapin. It just kind of became a sign of no-till growers because Clackamas Coot back in the day said that the chapin sprayer was a good sprayer. We all agreed, all of us use them. If somebody gifted you a chapin sprayer and it may have had harmful chemicals in it for concrete, it may not be a good idea to use it. And since I'm not an expert on the chemical residues, how long they last, or any of that, I'm just not gonna be able to answer this question. My kind of gut check is if you really trust this person and they're telling you nothing harmful was ever in it, you might be able to trust them. But again, it's an important garden, and I'm not sure how to answer that properly. Fuzzy Bunny says, will you be lollipopping or defoliating the autos? No. I just wanted to show off the genetics, and this is a byproduct of me. Every time I run seed, I kind of just see what they do, and then from there I learn those lessons and I apply it to my training and my shape. I certainly could have gone and lollipopped a little bit more, at least cleaned up the lowers, shaved the legs, defoliated and all that, but when I run from seed, a lot of times I just really want to see what it's like, and I wanted to show the natural expression, so I hope that answers your question. Country with a K says, before the water goes anaerobic in the bottom of earth boxes, could you put a small air stone in there to keep sufficient oxygen in there? Really good question. I'm glad you brought this up. There's a whole bunch of people that use air stones. It's actually a pretty big argument. In the Probiotic Farmers Alliance, Alan is always taught to use the anaerobic reservoir, and I agree with it. But there's another couple of people that have come into the forum and said that air stones work great, and they're right as well. Both people are right. The difference is, with the air stone, there's a number of other problems that can occur. And here's what I've noticed. If your air stone goes out, you can kill your plant. It's almost like it becomes dependent upon this ulterior or this extra source of air. And if it can't phase shift. But if it's grown up in the stagnant reservoir and you're not keeping it full, the BuildASoil way, because we're using compost in there, we don't want 100% full reservoir all the time. We fill the reservoir full, immediately the plant drinks and it creates an air gap in there and it breathes. And so when we follow that, it works really well. But an air stone, I've heard, creates intense results. The challenge is if the air stone fails or gets clogged up by the root system, it can be catastrophic. So just be aware of that. Ultimately, to know, you have to do what I do. Try literally everything and decide for yourself. Throw an air stone in there. Just make sure you listen to what I said. If the power goes out or if a problem with an air stone occurs, it could be a big factor. Just like I learned the opposite with earth boxes. If you fill them too early with too much water and it becomes totally anaerobic, it can completely kill your plant. So do what you want and report back to me if you end up doing the air stone and you find the same thing that I found. Okay, Mosley says, I recently bought the take and bake and a 3x3 bed and have been having a white powdery substance around the bottom edges. What would this be? The plant themselves look great. I'm assuming that you're talking about a white powdery substance around the soil, but now that I'm reading it again around the edges, I'm thinking what you're saying is when you're watering and in the 3x3 from Grassroots, there's a plastic liner and you get to the bottom of the bed and there's 3 or 4 inches. that allow the moisture to leak out the bottom of your 3x3 bed. Well, as that happens, depending on the type of water that you're using, and because there's calcium in the soil, the water pulls down and it'll kind of stain the fabric with like a white buildup. And it may actually be some sort of mold if it's really moist down there. It could also be that it's just calcium buildup or like a bicarbonate buildup. And so that's pretty standard on these living soil containers. It just builds up with stuff and most people just leave it there and it's of no issue. If the plants are really healthy, I wouldn't worry about it. If I'm misinterpreting your question and it's literally just some white powdery growth on the soil, that's fantastic. And that's usually what happens when it's shaded out and we have a seed meal or a bokashi or a malted barley and it activates some of the biology in the soil and you get that white Santa's beard looking breakdown. We show that in our video. You can see that as well when we make the take and bake. So next, Max says, is it important to get 2 AC infinities for in and out to control the temp humidity more efficiently? It's always important to have the best environment your budget will allow because that's the most important difference you can make. You get the genetics, you get a good environment, everything's handled. And so if 2 fans really make your life easy, depending on where you live, then I would absolutely require that as the minimum. But I'll have you know, I most often just use 1 and have a passive intake. I have an AC Infinity bringing constant air intake into my tent right now because I wanted to just really do things right on the YouTube series, and it does make a difference having constant fresh air from a CO2 perspective, and it does help mitigate and balance things. But the other reason is I'm not running an AC Infinity in my 10x10 for the exhaust. That's on my NIWA, and that's going based off of temperature. And then I have my intake just constantly running all the time. And so it's up to you, but the goal is to follow our environmental settings. And if you only need 1 fan to get there, then that's good enough for me. If it takes you 2 fans to be more consistent, then that would eventually be a goal for me. So I'm sorry I couldn't be more direct. The goal is the environment, not the number of fans. You do not need more than 1 fan. Oftentimes 2 will make a big difference from stability standpoint. So hopefully that helps. Oliveria says, thank you for all the free info you consistently pump out. Dude, you're welcome. Quick question, can I use coconut flour, coconut milk powder, or coconut palm sugar to substitute freeze-dried coconut water? Or a combination of the 3? Thank you for any answers, trying to use what's available to me. No. And the reason why is I don't want you to search for something when it's not there. In the essence that coconut sugar is probably already a bit of a reach as far as being an expensive ingredient. A lot of people notice a ton of benefits to it. And the benefits occur because it's such a good substance when it's alive. So if you get a young green coconut, picture this, it's not really a seed, it's like a drupe or something, but it's gonna grow a tree out of this green coconut. And when it matures, it gets woodier and the inside fills with meat. But in the beginning, that's liquid in there. We're literally robbing the liquid enzyme creation inside a sterile environment that's full of almost like cow milk is to a baby cow with all that colostrum. We've got to a baby tree all the enzymes that are gonna be active that take part in this process, and they're literally creating life within inside this vessel. We're hoping to steal that. And when you steal coconut milk powder, it's already finished, it's grown, it's bypassed that young stage, and it could be oxidized and aged and chopped up and powdered, and now it's more about just like carbon, starchiness, like it's not really the same. And when you're talking coconut palm sugar, we're just talking about the sugar, not the living properties there. So I guess just I want you to truly consider why we added it. I think what would be more appropriate for a situation where coconut water sugar was too expensive, the water powder, or not easily available. Alternatively, if you live somewhere where there's fresh green coconuts, that would be the go-to. If you don't have those, a sprouted seed tea might be a better way to go. Smaller seeds, more of them, cost effective, sprout them, blend them up, and serve that water right to your plants. You could also use a pre-sprouted seed like we carry in the gnarly barley or our malted barley that's organic. Any of those are using enzymes as well as some of the natural sugar. Like if you use a corn SST, they are sweet. I mean, there's a lot of sugar in there. So I feel like a corn SST would be a better substitute than coconut flour, coconut milk powder, coconut palm sugar. However, you're on the right thinking that any of those other products could be of beneficial use. It's just that a lot of times we're after the best bang for the buck for the actives that we're looking for. And the coconut water freeze-dried, it has to be harvested that day, freeze-dried that day with a hope to get the benefits. The others are not. That's why we get freeze-dried. Alternatively, you can get the harmless harvest directly from the farm, refrigerated the whole way, but it's really expensive. And I think sprouted seed tea is gonna be your best go-to. So good question. Corey says, why is the microbe complete 85% diatomaceous earth? Oh, really good question. You can talk directly to Rootwise about this, but any microbial needs a carrier, and that's gonna be predominantly the weight. When you're looking at microbes, we're talking microscopic organisms. They need a carrier that has lots of surface area to be able to store them in there safely. Commonly, what you'll see in the industry is other microbial manufacturers will use talcum powder. It's a dirty product, and it's not nearly as much surface area, and it's not nearly as good. But the diatomaceous earth, food grade, is a non-crystalline silica that's not dangerous to have around, can be eaten, and is really, really good as far as a microbial condo. And so it is a premium carrier for the microbes. What we're interested in is the consortium of microbes, and by weight, the CFU, and we're getting really, really, really good numbers out of the Rootwise, as opposed to concerning ourselves with the diatomaceous earth being what we're buying. That's just the carrier. You have to have something, and I like seeing that food grade, high quality carrier. I'm not saying all talc is the same, but any microbial product has to have a carrier of some sort, and that's the one that Rootwise chose to use, and I agree with it. Crypt says, does anyone know if I can keep bending my plant under the trellis while in flower? Yes, you absolutely can. I don't think it's a great idea because we want stuff to be above, right? But if you've got a portion of your plant that's taller, sometimes I have a big stretching strain and I know it's gonna push really hard and I have limited space. I might keep tucking for the first few days of flower and then let her rip so I can fill my screen up a little more. But that's just because I know the genetic and I'm willing to play with it a little bit. In the end, there's no real wrong answer, but just know you're playing with fire if you keep it under the screen the whole time and then it finally goes to flower. The only reason you really want to do that is if you're really maximizing a small space. A lot of these tools came about from micro growing and really like inside a computer case or inside a 2x2 tent, right? So consider what your goal is. So if your idea is you're running out of space, then of course you can keep tucking it. If your idea is to maximize yield and you haven't filled up the screen and it's a big stretcher, sure. If you're uncertain, not run the genetic, I would say let's avoid tucking after you flip to flower. Newbie Nug says, which apogee do you use? How far off are the readings from the Pulse Pro? Did the last update fix the pulse readings accuracy? You know, I think what I recommended last time was that the readings were fairly close, and as long as against themselves they mean something, it's useful. I will tell you the phone apps are terrible. I've never had those work well. The Pulse Pro I haven't tested in a while. I don't think it was terribly far off. I can't really remember. I remember leaving that thinking, okay, this is decent, but it was more of a pain to use, and I had to take target readings. I couldn't just move it around and see the movement on my meter is really my main concern. But we use the apogee. Let me just look it up real quick. Let's see, apogee, BuildASoil. MQ500 quantum par meter. That's the one that we used. So hopefully that answers your question. Rob says, do you guys have a whole 4x4 kit? You know, Rob, we're working on it. Every time I put an entire kit together, if we're out of one item, it becomes a huge issue. And so we've not been able to stick one down. However, there's been talk about actually carrying the lights for the tent in stock. That's really the big sticking point. I would like to offer a 4x4 kit that we fully have in stock, and the moment you order it, we can ship. And we plan on doing that, but we don't have them yet. Look for that in the future. I appreciate the reminder. Tom says, how many plants would you put into a 15-gallon pot? Really, that's up to you. So if you're talking a 15-gallon pot and you have a small grow space, you're limited and you really like flavors, I'd put like 4 plants in there, no problem. But ideally 1 plant in a 15-gallon is probably gonna be more conducive to the BuildASoil way. I just don't want people to be scared to do what they like. So if you wanna put 4 plants in there, top dress and just flip to flower early, you can still get 4 flavors out of a 15. Certainly, I've seen a lot of people put 2 or 3 plants in a 15-gallon and have good results. I just personally would put 1. Let's see, Goofball. Tough on the shoulder, do you really do Jiu Jitsu? Laugh out loud. Yo much, happy 420. Thanks for all the content. Always learn lots on here. Yes, I really do Jiu Jitsu. I practice 2 to 4 times a week. Not as much as I'd like. There was a time where I was going probably 5-6 days a week. It's a big passion of mine. As far as my shoulder, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in there or what, but yeah, thanks for the what's up, Goofball. Bruce says, I found one basalt company in Germany, but it got a pH of 9.8. Can anybody confirm that that's okay? Not a problem at all. The pH of a rock dust, not really a big issue, but I would be concerned with why, meaning is it saturated with like sodium, or is there something that's jacking the pH up so high? Is it full of bicarbonate? It might be nice to know. If you're gonna do a lot of work with this material, I would definitely send it off to the lab and see what's in it. If you do know it to be a basalt and the pH is high, I'm kind of curious how they know that. So I would ask how they determined that. So maybe you can send me the info on it. Send it to jeremy@buildasoil.com. I'll look into it for you as well. Let's see, DG, should I be using regular seeds in my search for a keeper? I've been using feminized seed, thanks. Whatever you want. Ultimately, if you find a keeper and it's not very stable, that's kind of a bummer, right? Because that keeper might be a keeper, but if it's not stable, does it truly define keeper? To me, as a personal grower, if you find something that you like the taste and you like the effects of, and it's not terribly hard to grow, like that's a keeper, do it. Like, you know what you want, uniquely. Now, if you're gonna run a company and be a breeder and your keeper was not very stable and other people have that high on their list of concern and you sell it and you lie about it, could be a problem. But if you're genuine and it's something that you really like, I would never let anything stand in the way of me in keeping something. Even if it is a feminized seed, if it's stable and thrown down, like who cares? I've got a keeper at home from a feminized seed that I like. So it's up to you, it's always personal. A lot of people do gravitate towards regular seeds because if they're looking for a keeper, a lot of times that means they want to breed with it. Sometimes they're looking for a male, but those are personal questions. So great question, glad you asked. Jack, with living soil, can you have red wigglers in it? Yes, in fact, I believe you should. A lot of people will say that you shouldn't, or they'll say you absolutely have to. I think you can grow without red wigglers, no problem. But for me, both on our farm and in a living soil bed, when I have a couple hundred red wigglers in a bed of soil and I top dress, I like to know the worms are gonna eat that and bring it down for the plants. Red wigglers do a great job in the mulch layer and they're my recommended go-to. In fact, so much so that they're on the BuildASoil schedule. We recommend putting a handful of worms in each container and they'll self-regulate by multiplying up to what that container can sustain. Gabe says, quick question, what's a solid LED grow light you'd recommend? Realistically, any of the grow lights that are out there that you can access that have a Meanwell driver and like a Samsung chip. The next step is the manufacturer. Like if you buy something from Amazon for $100, once it fails, it's probably done. And it may not last a year. If you buy something from a reputable manufacturer with a long warranty, it should live up to that warranty and longer. So the goal for me is what you hope to get out of it. If you just grab a light because it's cheap and you're hoping to get one season out of it, literally grab any light. If we're talking about something that I really invest into and believe in, the timber grow lights are one of my absolute favorites. That's why we use them for everything. Challenge with them, a little bit smaller business. And since they have such high quality and high demand, sometimes they can be on back order. Find something that fits your budget and ask some questions. But for the most part, nowadays with LEDs, if you're getting the top bin, LED and a good driver, you're basically just buying the builder to make it for you and you have to believe in them. So I like timber. You might find something else you like, but I think that the good news is most LEDs nowadays, pretty good if you're getting that new. The old blurple stuff was really hit or miss, so stay away from all that. Brian says, hello BAS. What's up, Brian? Wondering about the 3x3 bed and the beneficials added in season 1. 2 questions. First, do you have pest pressure already for the beneficials to take? Second, do you still have protection from your first inoculation? I really still think I have protection. We grew a lot of cover crop in there, and a lot of these can live off pollen and other things. I found worms that were still active and predatory mites that were still active, so it seems as if a lot of the benefits are still there, but I don't have any pest pressure right now. It seems like a lot of what I added is still there, and it's worked because I've not had any issue. There's a few fungus gnats flying around the tent. I used some mustard, I used the beneficials. It's mainly about good watering practices, and that seems to make a big difference. We're not perfect, but I'd say that what we did was a good investment because we haven't had any problems. Eric says, can you use other bacteria cultures such as Brettanomyces? Is that a beer brewing one? I don't see why not, but I would look into what their primary function is and see if it's a benefit in what I'm doing. I really trust Microbe Complete and Biofos to be my original IMOs. They were selected from healthy farms. They are not so weird that it would be like invading a farm for you to add it. And it's not from another tech like cheese or from beer. It's literally from farming, and that makes the most sense to me, so I like using that. I like using stuff from the worm bin because that makes sense. It's a breakdown of nutrients that's natural. So ask yourself those questions, and if you think that it fits in there, I would have no hesitation to add other stuff. I would just be careful what the reason was, and then I would maybe monitor for some sort of benefit so I knew if it was worth it in the future. Good question. BC says, where can I get Rootwise seeds? Do they sell them? So he's had packs occasionally, like at events we go to. I would just get them from him and like offer them to locals. Like he's never really distributed them anywhere. So if you happen to stumble across them, it's like a lucky day. You might be able to hit him up on Instagram, see if he's got any left. I believe Dave Allkid here, maybe trying to get some to distribute through his website. Like it's always like on the underground, but I don't have a direct answer for you. The reason why we offered them local is They were from Paonia. They finish on time out here. They're really good with our climate. I'm gonna pop some this year. In fact, got some Canyon Queens right here. So I'd sell you mine, but I'm keeping everything I got. So let's see, Glow Boxing says, how in the hell do you not use perlite? It's beyond important, especially for drainage. You know, drainage is important, but pumice actually floats in water. It's more natural, it's less environmentally problematic, and we find that we don't need it at all. In fact, when hemp farmers first started growing out here, they were wondering how we were gonna mend an acre with perlite or pumice or rice hulls. Turns out you don't need any of it. The plants crush right in the clay. Drainage is important, but the industry has made perlite, which is obsidian, with energy invested to puff it up like popcorn. They use it not only because it works well, but because it's cheap to ship and it's lightweight. We never started off with that premise. We want a no-till soil. When you water a soil with perlite, the perlite can dislodge and float. It can crush and disappear over time. Pumice is a much more permanent answer for a living soil that you don't throw away. And we found that perlite is absolutely not needed. And so I appreciate you asking the question. So we have a seedling soil that we just released, and we use ProMix to make it. And I'll go back to this. Living soil is like big containers of soil. When we're talking these little tiny cells, the miniature perlite that they use and the lightweightness of it is good for scale when you're carrying these trays and they have to be a certain weight. Our seedling soil, we wanted to be the right texture. Then we added our favorite to it. So we're stealing the technology from them and we're adding what we're good at. We think it made a good seedling soil, but in any no-till soil, we never use perlite. So hopefully that answers your question. Marcus says, what sprayer do you guys recommend for foliar spraying neem oil? I have 3 rainmakers and I spray GrowCal and EM5 for 2 of them with no problem. My neem sprayer gets clogged a lot. Now we're to the point where I'm not sure if I can fix it this time. Which sprayer might be best for spraying neem oil around the garden? We use the chapin because it can spray particulate, but at 3.5 gallons it may not be large enough for your grow. So we use a Grow King sprayer, it works really well. Same thing on my farm. My wife always jokes, she's like, oh, they just don't clean it out. But if you follow her protocol for cleaning it, it literally is clean and you can use it every time. So that's very, very important, is the cleaning aspect. And you wanna make sure it's fully emulsified. So use the Q or some Thermex or some Agsil, really make sure it's emulsified, use it right away, and then clean really well. The chapin has different sized nozzles. You can use the 1 gallon per minute, it'll never get clogged. Heck, even the half gallon shouldn't get clogged with neem oil. But unfortunately, I'm not an expert on other brands of sprayer. But let me look up a Rainmaker sprayer. I see, so they're a plastic backpack one. I could imagine maybe just a different nozzle would help fix that, but since it's going through a pump, I'm not sure if you have the electric one or an actual pump one. Those would be all my concerns. Making sure it's well emulsified and really well cleaned afterwards. No magic answer there, just do your best. The Chapin 3.5 gallon, it can spray a good amount of particulate, even like worm castings and stuff. So it handles the neem oil like no problem whatsoever. Mr. Mart, can you use Dr. Bronners during flower? Started getting thrips, please help. Yes. If you're worried, you can get the Dr. Bronner's baby soap that has no essential oil. However, what I've learned is even if you use peppermint hard at 1 ounce per gallon with the dilution of essential oil and essential oils being pretty volatile, I would be totally comfortable using 1 ounce to 2 ounces per gallon in flower as opposed to dealing with a thrip. However, if it's very small amount of thrip, it may not be worth it. Use your best judgment, defoliate the problem leaves, clean up the plant a little bit. I would probably say in flower, I would use 1 ounce per gallon of Dr. Bronner's, and I would do it back to back multiple times, and then I would cut it out and use plain water. Make sure that I didn't do it too late where the plants had good sun and airflow for a few days at least to make sure they were really breathing and not containing any of that soap. So hopefully that helps answer your question. In fact, I've used Dr. Bronner's during flower and I've had no ill effect. So hoping that helps you. Okay, Robbie, what size tent would you use that Magnolia 4 light in? Really, any 4x4, 5x5 tent would be great. The Magnolia, it is a lot more powerful than these strips, but it is a little bit smaller, so you have to have it slightly farther away to get the spread. I'm using it over a 5x5 area, and it might be a bit of a stretch, but I think a 4x4 would be perfect for it. A 5x5, since it's so powerful, would be the maximum, as long as you had enough height for it to get that distribution of lighting. Otherwise, smaller than that might be a little bit overkill. I really like the Magnolia though. It's probably the best light I've ever used. Ken says, in the video you were talking about Clackamas Coots amended vermicompost. Where can I find out more about this? If you just Google Clackamas Coots worm castings, how he made them, he uses the barley straw and the comfrey and the amount that he adds, and he makes the compost, then he adds that to the worms, and there's a whole story on it. I'd give you the breakdown on camera, but I'd literally just be Googling it and reading it to you. Maybe I'll have Coot on, we'll do an episode just on how he made his compost. That was the last question, so I hope it helped you. When I answer these, it's always really fun. It comes up with things that we don't normally talk about in my day-to-day when it comes to the 10x10, and I know that adds a lot of value. If you've got questions that you want answered, put them in here, smash the like button, tell your friends about this. Really helps us when we get the algorithm going. And over time, having all these questions answered gives us place to send our customers to. And we love the interaction in the comments. Keep it coming. And until then, I'll see you guys on the next episode.